Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, guests of honors, I cannot express how happy and grateful I am to stand here in front of you and to welcome you to the 4th Global Peter Drucker Forum. We started this venture, if I may say so, some 5 years ago and organized the first forum at the occasion of the Peter Drucker centenary in 2009, and here we are now at the 4th forum. The Peter Drucker Forum evolved from a commemoration event for Peter Drucker to an event which is inspired still by his fundamental tenets and also by his way of thinking, but is entirely turned to the future. We are proud as a small non-profit organization that we have made it to this point, and we are thankful to all those who have accompanied and supported us. First, the Drucker Institute, to whom we are affiliated, and who is represented by its executive director, Rotman, from whom you will hear a bit later this morning, and a group of Drucker societies from all over the world who joined this forum. Then, of course, we are indebted to the Drucker family, which is, with its doyenne, Doris, Peter Drucker's widow, who will be speaking to you later via video. And we are very grateful to our sponsors, and I will show them to you on the screen, yes. To our sponsors, and I cannot name them all, but the big ones, the Raiffeisen organization, with 2 parts of their organization, 3M, the EFMD, and the others that you can see on the list. Without them, it would be difficult to have this type of event, in particular in a time where everything you spend in business must have an immediate ROI. This is obviously not so easy for events like this. But we have, in addition to the sponsors, we have also institutional members who support us. And to name a few of the important institutional members, I would like to mention Malik Management Center. You know that Fredmund Malik is one of the prominent Drucker followers. Contrast Management Consultants and Mazars Group, who is represented here, and whom you will hear more of them today. Last but not least, it is you, the participants of this forum, who confirm that it may be relevant what we do, and I would like to thank you all for coming and joining us. You're coming from 33 countries. The majority of you is from the business side, 55% approximately, 20% are from academia and from non-profit NGO side, and 15% represent the young generations, the young generation whose future we are in effect talking about. They are key stakeholders. You will see more of them this evening when it comes to recognizing the winners of the Drucker Challenge Essay Contest. We have also important media with us, which I believe reflects in a way our growing reputation. National and international media. If I name a few of the international, and you will see them on the next slide. So, no, sorry, go back. Sorry, go back, this was too fast. You don't see them on the slide, I will name them. Media like the Financial Times, The Economist, Harvard Business Review, and as I said, a number of local media. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme Capitalism 2.0 indicates that we are currently at a juncture of our history. Is capitalism the system that should help us to create a prosperous future? And how should it evolve? How to avoid the terrible failures that have brought us close to the brink of chaos? I think we can say that today. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, he said, capitalism is surely the worst system except for all the others that have been tried. Can we make it better? And what does it take? Then the other question is, can we leave these burning issues to politicians and economists? Or should managers have a voice that can be heard? After all, they are the ones to make things happen in organizations and between organizations. If I think about these 2 days, I believe it would be too much asked to claim that we will have all the answers to the big questions. The time of simple one-size-fits-all solutions is over. There are no recipes. However, as Drucker observed, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. We need to foster a new logic by entertaining different perspectives, by looking at the world through different lenses. This is what the Drucker Forum is all about. Over the next 2 days, we want to encounter new ideas, or at least to put ideas through a new filter. And we have an outstanding, I really can say outstanding group of world-class speakers here who will share their thinking and their ideas, their fundamental ideas with you. I would like to leave you with a good message, despite all the doom and gloom we have around us. There's a huge hidden treasure of productivity, creativity, innovation, and wealth creation in our organizations today, be it business or non-business. At the end, only those can pull us out of the crisis. It was for a good reason why Drucker called out the biggest challenge of the 21st century, management, to make knowledge in organizations productive. It means changing the way we think about organizations and hierarchies and freeing up the enormous human potential that is in some way buried there. It is quite encouraging that a recent IBM Global survey with 1,700 CEOs and leaders worldwide has shown that a broad movement is emerging to change organization culture and their operations into more open and collaborative and entrepreneurial environments to give a boost to innovation and value creation. Of course, we must hope that also the politicians will understand to set the right framework conditions. Part of this new opening is driven by technology. In this sense, I'd like to point out our own focus on communication even beyond the forum. Social media are becoming a key component of this, and now I will show you something about how we can stay in contact during the conference with social media and beyond. And what you see in the middle is the hashtag for Twitter, those who are familiar with Twitter. And I think these social media will have a bigger impact than we currently would believe. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your time, for coming here, and I hope you will find your time well spent after these 2 days. Thank you very much.
Our next welcome speaker, Klaus Buchleitner, has a deep knowledge and a keen interest in Peter Drucker thinking. We are particularly pleased that as the new CEO of Raiffeisen LB and the Raiffeisen Holding, Klaus Buchleitner continues being a great supporter of the Peter Drucker Society. Raiffeisen has been a sponsor since the inception of the Peter Drucker Society and the Drucker Forum. Please.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. First of all, let me give you very cordial greetings from Klaus Buchleitner, whom I'm not. My name is Georg Kinz. I'm Deputy CEO of Raiffeisen Landesbank, and unfortunately, Klaus cannot be with us this morning, so I want to give you his warm greetings. I will try to represent him, and I decided to tell you a story about my son, Louis. When I returned home the other day, Louis, my son, who is 5 years old, ran into me and said, "Daddy, imagine I want to build the Concorde airplane." And I said, "Great idea, Louis, but you know, Concorde crashed many years ago." And he said, "Yes, I know, but that's why I want to build it." And I said, "Louis, that's a great idea, but you know, that's a complex thing, and it's great, and it's complicated." And I said, "Yes, I know. That's the reason why I want to build it. Grandpa flew to New York with the Concorde, and so will I. And I'm quite sure I'll be finished with that until Saturday." He turned around, headed for his room, and didn't take a second look to me. When, ladies and gentlemen, is that moment when we lose our confidence? When is that moment when we lose our inspiration? And when is that moment we forget the capability for change? I came here this morning with a firm will not to look into the downward spiral of the crisis, but I came here to look for opportunities, for the world of opportunities. And I would like to invite all of you to be a part of this essential part of this engine for change, for finding these new horizons. This is not a commemorative meeting to honor Peter Drucker. This is the Peter Drucker's Future Lab. Thank you.
Thank you. Georg Kapsch is here. Just to make sure, please. Georg Kapsch is the president of the Federation of Austrian Industries, and it is a pleasure to have you here, also someone who is close to Peter Drucker's concepts.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure, of course, for me to be invited to participate in this Peter Drucker Forum. It's a great history. Peter Drucker has a great history, and he influenced the economy very much. This year's title, Capitalism 2.0, New Horizons for Management, and I personally would add entrepreneurs and politicians as well. But anyway, indicates the great importance of change in the entire society as well as in the economy particularly. Uncertainty, disparity, and unresolved challenges, both on a political level and especially in regard to the financial economy, are questioning the effectivity and the fairness of our today's social liberal market economy. Exploring new horizons for managers, addressing their responsibilities and their opportunities is justified and absolutely necessary. But, however, we have to think far beyond the horizons for management if we want to resolve the current situation in the world. Society and the attitude of society is changing. The value equation which we're common with in the past will not be the same in the future. Therefore, we need to reflect on and to reconsider society and the economy in general. We are currently at a break point. That's my observation. Even if it is sometimes true that there is no breakthrough without the breakdown, we should anyway try to avoid this breakdown. Society and prosperity will be at risk in case social cohesion breaks. Thus, the Federation of Austrian Industry has created and commenced an economic policy discourse. Europe can be proud of its 500 years history of success, both economically as well as socially, as far as in regard to what they did in Europe, not always what they did in the rest of the world. And industry and business has contributed a lot. But where do we proceed? Where do we target to? What could be the options, the expectations, and the objectives of a basically rich region like Europe in general is? Social liberal market economy was and is undoubtedly, and that's what we heard in the morning already, the most successful system in history. But it's not given that it will be the most successful system in the future as well. But till up to now it is, because it was able to combine economic success and social responsibility. Unfortunately, this model has not yet found its final shape and is permanently in negotiation, in development, but sooner or later one could imagine that it will find its final shape or it won't. What we must not do is to rest and to rely on the successes on the past. Success is not just defined as pure economic success, but economic success is the basis for welfare in the world. We have to combine economic success with individual responsibility of management, entrepreneurs, and politicians. Capitalism 2.0 should be designed within a society which is efficient, which is humane, and which is sustainable, requiring undoubtedly entrepreneurship. The model of a future-oriented social market economy and society need both freedom on the one hand side and responsibility on the other side. Freedom provides the basis for innovation, for opportunities, and for success. Responsibility ensures that freedom of one person, freedom that one person enjoys, does not in any way harm or restrict the freedom of another person. In order to reconcile the two, individual responsibility and solidarity within the economy and within the entire society are required. Competition and equality of opportunities are also characteristics of such a system. Competition because it allows to exploit existing potentials for growth, and equality of opportunities to gain more opportunities, more chances for more people in education, in migration, and many other regards. In order to avoid a breakdown becoming reality in this world, we need to see our economy going far beyond the concentration just on economic issues and on economic performance, but simultaneously to get more efficient and more productive. You might think that this is a contradiction in itself, but it's not. One can combine value creation and value-based economy with productivity gains. But in order to achieve this combination and to create a future-oriented, liberal social market economy, the entire society needs to create a common vision. And this means, inter alia, to abandon the conservative shareholder value drive in the economy. We have to reconsider what shareholder value really means, especially in regard to the benefit of the entire society. It's not just in favor of shareholders. What kind of vision could it be? What could the future market economy be all about? It should be based, from our perspective, on 3 principles. First principle is freedom and quality of life. Well-being of individuals does not just depend upon welfare, but it depends primarily upon a kind of self-determination, because that's the real core of a future-oriented society. And second principle, common good and participation. People shall have the opportunity and the ability to create their own design of their life, irrespectively what it will be. But it's just the opportunity, it's not forgiven. But this requires commitment of each and everybody in the society, and it requires responsibility. Participation, on the other side, means that people are entitled to participate in democratic processes all around the world in our society, but on the other hand, have to contribute to the society. They must not always wait that they are receiving from the society, but they have to first give what they can to the society. Third principle, prosperity and commitment. Economic success is the basis of prosperity. Prosperity does not just mean cash in your pocket. Prosperity means access to the labor market, means access to education, means access to health, and means access to culture and diversity. In spite of the said, I really regret that Europe currently seems to reset and to rely on the success of the past and is not sufficiently dynamic and is too much oriented internally instead of looking to what's going on in the entire world. Whereas on the other hand, we absolutely would need individual commitment. To pursue the visions, we need common values in our economy and in the society as a whole. Particularly fairness and justice. Secondly, openness and mutual respect. And thirdly, achievement orientation and solidarity. The future of our economic system is strongly and directly linked to an evolution or a revolution in the society, depending upon what we as managers and entrepreneurs are doing. Because we are very important influences in what will come up in the society. We need to reach, and that's very important, people's hearts in order to get them understand and internalize the advantages of new social liberal market economy. If you just reach the brain of people, this does not work. You need to reach the hearts of the people. And meeting the hearts of the people means to rethink our daily doing. And in particular, we have to prevent in a new social liberal market economy from financial economic disasters caused by irresponsible speculations. Economy has to serve society, but not the other way around. But on the other hand, economy cannot be made responsible for each and everything that does not work in society. we have to keep in mind that politicians just can't distribute what prospering companies with well-trained and educated employees are generating. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was looking here just once and saw 5 minutes, and I didn't realize that it stopped.
Thank you, Georg. Our next welcome speaker, Thomas Sattelberger, is Vice President of the Board of Trustees of the European Foundation for Management Development. He has served several boards like Telecoms and Continental, and he has been a great supporter and sponsor from the very beginning. Thomas, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorary guests, on behalf of EFMD and as its Vice President for the Corporates, I welcome you to this challenging conference. EFMD is a global network of many hundred business schools, companies, public sector bodies and associations. It was formed 40 years ago, and its mission from the first day was to act as a catalyst to promote and enhance excellence in management development in Europe and worldwide. For the fourth time, we are now supporting and sponsor the Global Peter Drucker Forum. We are delighted to do that because the world needs a body that wants to question the current traditional managerial, entrepreneurial, and economic models. Present times need intellectual lighthouses to enlighten possible paths to the future. Many of us wonder why 5 years after the beginning of the global economic crisis, the debate about capitalism and its options has not reached critical mass yet. It is still restricted to some more exclusive circles. Financial capitalism is a dead animal, but a living animal. And even in those circles, just take, for example, Davos, knowledgeable participants return home and do the same as before, or even more of the same as before. You might recall the work of Thomas Kuhn on paradigms and paradigm shifts, and it's very clear it needs scientific revolution, disruptive change, and crisis that create new mental maps that enable new dominant paradigmatic thinking. In that respect, thinking and debating about Capitalism 2.0 is a nascent, emerging science, nevertheless necessary to build up a new model. But let me give you some reflective thoughts. Utopian socialists, based on the work of Henri de Saint-Simon, Charles Fourier, and Robert Owen in the first quarter of the 19th century, was aiming towards a more equal society. Those thinkers didn't aim for a class struggle or political revolution, but for the cooperation of like-minded people for an egalitarian, communalist, and meritocratic society. Whereas all the following thinkers, from Marx to Lenin, pursued antagonistic frameworks, which turned good models to worse ones. Or in my own country, the Rhine capitalism, the so-called responsible balanced capitalism in the fragile pre-World War II era in Germany, which accepted societal and social responsibility, opportunistically bowed into the erosion of democracy in the Weimar Republic and the fascist ideology. Business lacked principled embeddedness in democracy. A third example, Anthony Giddens, former director of the London School of Economics, author of Beyond Left and Right and of The Third Way, The Renewal of Social Democracy, served as a key advisor to former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. It was Giddens' third way approach, which has been Tony Blair's political approach. However, despite the claims of constraining excessive corporate behavior and of taming capitalist markets, ironically, financial capitalism enjoyed a significant higher degree of freedom under the light touch approach of Blair and Brown than it did under conservative governments. In pointing out the derailment of seemingly good new models, I do not want to take a cynical approach, but focus on one key issue: the close connection of economics and politics. When we discuss Capitalism 2.0, we need to discuss, beside the role of the civic society and the role of the state, especially the embedding political system and the political power structures, just for the sake of not being naive or blue-eyed. Democratic frameworks govern the microcosm and the microcosm of business. But beyond power and politics, there is good news ahead, that we do not manipulate the Homo economicus. Harvard's Yochai Benkler debunks with a myriad of scientific findings that humans are not self-interested per se. He summarizes in his book, The Unselfish Gene, human beings are more willing to be more cooperative, trustworthy, and generous than the dominant economic model has permitted us to assume. Paul Krugman proposes the adequate recipe. We need to bury outdated theories as science progresses from funeral to funeral. If this year's Peter Drucker Forum contributes to the funeral, it is well done. Thank you.
As I'm guiding you through the day today, I would just like to make clear that what we heard until now were welcome addresses. And now opening addresses will follow. It is my great honor to present Dan Shechtman as our first opening speaker. Dan is a distinguished professor of technology, entrepreneurship at the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. Dan was awarded the 2011 Nobel Prize for the discovery of quasi-crystals. I would say that his achievements go far beyond chemistry, and in the Financial Times of November 11th, he was called the pioneer of Israel's startup revolution. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this presentation. One correction, I'm not a distinguished professor of technological entrepreneurship, but rather of materials engineering. Makes a little difference. What are my credentials to talking to you today? You will see a little bit later. Let me give you one moment a picture of the world that we live in today. There are good news and bad news. The good news, for instance, is that we live in a world of peace. Huh? There is no cross-boundary war around the world now. The bad news is that there are very many local clashes between tribes all over the world. There's a lot of heat in different countries. These are tribal wars. Another good news is that the rate of growth of the world population is declining all the time. And if it will continue to do so, in 20 years, the population growth of the world will be 0. The bad news is that it's not evenly distributed around the world. In Europe, there are about 1.5 children per woman. In the Far East, there are countries in which it is 1 child per woman, while in other countries, less developed, there are more children per woman. In Niger, in Africa, there are 7.3 children per woman on the average. So, what does it mean to us? This is the subject of my talk, Technological Entrepreneurship, a Key to World Peace and Prosperity. And let me present yourself a little more. I am a professor in Haifa, Israel, and I live in Haifa. I have 9 grandchildren, 4 children, and 1 wife. You have more, you know, this is why you laugh. So, where does technological entrepreneurship comes in? There are 2 ways that I can give my talk. And I prefer to read from here, because this way you can also record it and see it later on. Although that's not the usual way I give talks. It is here. Okay. Nothing happens. Oh. Okay, what is technological entrepreneurship? And there are quite a few definitions. If you go to Google, there are wonderful definitions, one-page definitions. I prefer the shortest one because it tells you exactly what it is. Technological entrepreneurship is establishment of new technology venture. It's an establishment of new technology venture. It's a venture. There is a great chance of failure. So, oh my God. Okay. So, why technological entrepreneurship is important for the well-being of societies, countries in the world? Most of the countries in the world lack significant natural resources and are characterized by low standard of living with little hope for improvement due to population growth and mismanagement. This is true also for countries that are rich in natural resources but do not use them so wisely. On the other hand, people that live in countries that enjoy high standard of living are industrials, and their countries industrial. The basic reasons for this division is technological entrepreneurship nourished by free market economy, and we will dwell on that a little bit later. Technological entrepreneurship makes the difference. So, is there hope for everyone on the globe to improve their lives? Can technological entrepreneurship be motivated and taught so that generations of determined entrepreneurs will build up thriving economics? The clear answer to both questions is yes, but the process will take time and dedication. It all starts with education in general and scientific technical education in particular. There's also a way to expedite the process, which means a short-term solution, and this is beside basic education, of course. And this is start with already educated engineers and scientists who are the first candidates for entrepreneurial endeavors. They can do it, but need motivation, continuous instructions, and encouraging economic environment until they create successful startup and serve as a role model for the others. The name of the game is motivation. Motivation is the name of the game. You have to motivate people towards entrepreneurship. A process can start that will make huge difference in the life of a country, and living examples to countries that underwent this process are China, Israel, South Korea, Turkey, and many more, whose societies have shifted from agrarian societies to industrial within several decades. It's an amazing story. Thanks to the spirit of entrepreneurship and the motivation that create high-tech industries that led to guided by individual engineers and scientists. So, is it really possible to do all over the world? There are cultural considerations. One of them, which surprisingly is spread all over the world, is fear of failure. This is very well pronounced in the Far East, when in certain countries, if you fail, it's a shame on you, it's a shame on your family, shame on your city, shame on your president. And people, because of fear of failure, will not take the risk and will not start something. And I was surprised to learn that this is true all over the world, also in Europe, in the United States, in many other countries. This does not exist in Israel. In Israel, this is not the case. There is no fear of failure. If you fail as an entrepreneur, yes, you have a scar, but people will invest in you again because you are more experienced. This is something to learn from. Can we teach technological entrepreneurship? Yes, we can, and we should. So who teaches entrepreneurship in the world? There are Ivy League universities in the United States, as well as other universities in the US and around the world, that tend to teach startup management in MBA programs. This is startup management in MBA program. It's all over the world. Problem is, MBA startup managers do not usually open new high-tech startups, unless they have engineering background. It is the engineers, biologists, MDs, scientists, and computer experts that start new companies. So, we should teach them. So who should teach technological entrepreneurship? In addition to teaching startup management, it is a good idea to motivate and teach future entrepreneurs how to open a successful startup. Future entrepreneurs, these people that will open the startup. Future entrepreneurs are students of engineering, biology, physics, chemistry, computer science, MDs, and related subjects. These are the people who will do it. And universities should expose and motivate these students to consider opening high-tech business of their own. Universities should do that. So whom and where should we teach? We teach the youth. I tend to say, start teaching high schools, although people claim that you should teach even earlier than high schools. Motivate people in high schools. And there are many countries in the world, Israel included, in which there are many, many programs to teach entrepreneurship in high school and to have projects in which children invent new products and try to sell them, although on the local scale. In universities, we should teach the engineers, definitely the engineer, scientists, MDs, and so on, and teach technicians in vocational school. We should teach them and motivate them to open startups. Let me tell you my experience. This is my credentials. Over the past 27 years, I just started the 27th year now, I have conducted a technological entrepreneurship class at the Technion, and the class is large, and it's open to all Technion students. There are between 300 and 600 students in the class, depending on the size of the hall. The halls are always full. All lectures are given by invited speakers in my class. These are divided into 3 groups. The first groups are successful entrepreneurs. These are people who started bootstrapping from nothing so that the students can identify with them. But now they are very successful. And they tell about their experience. We'll talk about it. The second group of people that come to talk in my class are new startup entrepreneurs. And they have different stories to tell. And then there are the professionals. Now, how does it work? During the lecture, each student summarizes the lecture on a form. I know that he understands by writing it on the form. The reports are collected at the end of the lecture. Attendance mandatory. This is not in every class in our university. You don't have to attend all classes, but in my class, yes, you have to attend. Not all. There is no final exam. The reports, if you give me 10 reports out of 14 lectures, which is the start of the semester, you have a pass grade. Less than 10, fail. That's it. Very simple. So what does an invited speaker talk about? He should provide tips from his own experience, tell the stories of how he started and so on, and give advice from his or her experience. And these advices tells the students where the stepping stones are and where the stumbling blocks are, based on his own or her own experience. These entrepreneurs are role models. Remember the words, it's very important. Role models are very important. People can identify with them and want to follow their footsteps, role models. In a country that does not have role models, or a society that does not have role models of entrepreneurs, will find it difficult to encourage entrepreneurship. So if the audience can identify with the speaker, can believe that they can follow his or her footsteps, then and become a success story, we have achieved our goal. So what can an experienced invited entrepreneur talk about? He can talk about how he started, and each one of them has a different story, of course. He can talk about difficulty he faced and the way he overcame them, as an example. He can tell what were his financial resources, how he found proper partners, how he found customers, what is the company culture. Company culture is very important, as very many of you know that. And motivation. The motivation, we tell them, should be the startup itself, not money. Money is a byproduct of a successful business. This is one of the things that we all tell them all the time. So, some people say that to become a successful entrepreneur, you have to be born with it. People are born with the spirit of entrepreneurship. Not so. You can teach everything. You can teach anything. Babies are not born religious. And yet, when they grow up, some of them become very religious because they were born to a religious family in that direction, or in that direction, or in that direction. You can teach. While it is true that some environment can affect ideas, mentality, and self-efficacy, it is also true that proper teaching can direct attention to the worthy subject, and good mentor can inspire enthusiastic followers. I'm not saying that the home does not have an effect, but I'm saying that if a home does not have a very strong effect, later on society, by education, can change. So what is the essential environment needed to promote successful startups? This is what we teach our students. First of all, we need good basic education for all. I want to emphasize this. Education is job one. There's nothing will happen without basic education. And what is the age in which you should start teaching science and engineering? Kindergarten. This is the age in which you all are extremely bright, age 4 and 5. This is the brightest period of our lifetime. You can teach anything. You can teach real physics to young people in the kindergartens. I do that. So good basic education to all. And then, of course, good engineering and science education. This is high school, university. Free market economy. Must be. Free market economy. Government policy and support. I'll say a few words about it. And of course, no corruption. A corrupt country doesn't have a chance. We teach our students mistakes that lead to failure of startups. Here are a few examples of mistakes that entrepreneurs do and which lead to the failure of their startup. Number one, non-professional management by the technological entrepreneur. Yes, do open a business. Yes, do open a technological business. But very soon you'll realize that although you are a great inventor, you are not a great manager. Hire a manager, we tell them. Give up your pride. Hire a good manager. Insufficient market survey and lack of market knowledge. If you don't do a good market survey, you realize that when your product is ready, you realize that they make it in China for 1/4 of the price. Do a good market survey beforehand. Wrong money sources. Money has color. There is good money and there is not so good money for a startup. We'll mention something about it. Partnering with friends rather than professionals. People tend to partner with their beer pals. Hey, let's make a business. But that guy who is a great pal and drinks beer is not good partner for you. Don't take a professional. Ego-driven entrepreneurship, I know best. Well, you don't. You don't. Be humble. And bad contract among founders. Sometimes many times, business is destroyed because partners do not agree on something and the contract between them doesn't cover that. What is the government world? We all say and we all agree that government should not be too influential in the economic market. But governments can contribute and should contribute. Examples, governments can open incubators for high-tech incubators. We have it in Israel, we have it in other countries. They can do partnership with VC funds. I want to dwell on that for a minute. In the mid-80s, there was one venture capital fund in Israel, one, and it was capital but no venture. They invest only in places where it was clear that they will succeed. And then the government of Israel did something wise, and I know that other countries did that too. They said, hey world, hey VC funds around the world, you invest $100 million in a VC fund, we invest $100 million. We take 50% of the risk. In 1 year, there was so much money that came from VC funds to Israel, it's unbelievable. And then the government, after a few years, got out of the business and money continued to flow. So government can do that. Form a chief scientist's office in every ministry, This helps communication between ministries and entrepreneurs. Support industrial innovation, research and development in startups. They can do that. Signed by national agreements and support by national funds. This is good collaboration between countries on different new ideas that can serve as basis for a startup. And form and support instruction and advice center for emerging startups. If the startup has a question, if a startup entrepreneur has a question, he has somewhere to turn and get a good answer from somebody who is experienced. A word about VC funds. Is it a good or bad source of funding? How does a venture capital fund works? It works the following way. Somebody collects a good sum of money from different people who invest in his fund. He, in turn, chooses where to invest it, and he promises the investors to pay them back with a profit, hopefully, in 5 years. You'll get your money back in 5 years. It means that in 5 years, he comes to the startup and says, hey, guys, we need to sell because I have to bring my money to give my money back to the investors. And in 5 years, you cannot establish yourself as a very successful startup. So they sell the idea, they sell the IP, gone is the startup. Bad news. So this is the problem. And in my opinion, the way to change it is for VC funds to extend the period of their investment maybe to 10 years. I'm not here to give excellent advices, but they have to extend it. 5 years is not enough. So right now, we tell our students, this is in low priority. Take money somewhere else. So where should we go to seek funding for a startup? We recommend strategic partners. Mid-cap companies in the United States, for instance, or in Europe, that will sell your product because they have the market, and your product fits exactly in their chain of products. Partner with them, and they will do the marketing and let you grow by investing in you. Angels, well, that's true everywhere. Small investors that will believe in your startup. Bootstrapping, wonderful. Don't take money from anybody. Just take a few partners that will help you. Give them shares. Give them a future profit. But right now, ask them to help you to make your startup a success. And last on the list, or my list, is VC funds. What money you should not use? If you don't have deep pockets, do not use your own money. because people will sell their apartments for a business that will eventually fail, destroy the family. Bad news, don't do that. And do not take money from relatives or friends. If you want to lose your family and friends, borrow money from them. Don't do that. And last is this slide. A few years ago, a book was published about Israel is startup nation. And you should, if you have a chance, read through this, because it tells the story of how a very primitive agrarian society turned into a high-tech powerhouse. And I want to finish by telling you a little story about my first experience with entrepreneurship. It was when I was about 8 years old. See, when I was about that age, Israel just started. 1948 was the independence year of the country. And immediately after independence, waves of immigration doubled the population, tripled the population of the country, and there was not enough food in the country for everybody. So the government, and rightly so, imposed austerity measures so that the food available will be evenly distributed on all the population, and everybody will have something to eat, nobody will die of hunger, but it should be evenly distributed. Okay. So one of the most wanted products were chicken. People wanted to eat chicken. And on the one hand, there were farms in which they raised chicken, but the farmers were obliged to sell to the government, who distributed the chicken evenly. But there were neighbors in the city to the villages, and they walked in the fields and bought a chicken and took it home outside the main distribution system. Now, the government didn't like it, and they hired many chicken policemen to roam the roads and the fields and catch everybody who smuggles a chicken from the farm to the city. And my mother was caught once and her chicken was taken to the chief of police. So, and it was like this for quite a while. And then the entrepreneurs said the following: if there is such demand for chicken, maybe we should raise chicken. And a neighbor of mine, he bought an incubator and started to hatch chicks, and he didn't count them before they hatched. And within 1 year, there were chicken for everybody. This is the power of entrepreneurship. And, oops. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here at the Drucker Global Forum. In 2011, the New York Stock Exchange opened a new outpost in Mahwah, New Jersey, which is a bucolic township of 25,000 inhabitants, about an hour drive north of Wall Street. One reason for creating the facility was pretty standard. Trading technology infrastructure takes up a lot of space, so moving it from expensive Manhattan to low-cost Mahwah saves money for the exchange. But another reason was a little more novel. The NYSE built the facility big enough to lease out space to third parties, deriving new revenue in addition to the cost savings. But who on earth would want to lease space in a New York Stock Exchange facility in Mahwah, New Jersey? Turns out that finding takers wasn't a problem at all. In fact, trading firms were very eager for the opportunity. These firms understood that having their server in close proximity to the NYSE servers would create a speed advantage. It would mean that trades from their co-located servers would reach the NYSE servers a few milliseconds faster than trades from servers not in the facility. But the NYSE immediately had a challenge. How would it allocate space within the facility? Some server bays were closer to the NYSE server, so they had a fractional time advantage over those that were farther away. Should the exchange auction off the real estate by location? Any tiered approach was likely to create an arms race within the building, which would be unseemly. No, the clever folks at the NYSE came up with a better solution. regardless of where the lessees were located within the facility, their servers would be connected to the NYSE server with cables of equal length, even if that meant coiling cables in inefficient lengths. There would be no arms race within the facility. Now, there's some fractured logic at work here. The NYSE was obsessed about making sure that those who paid a special price for preferential placement in the trading queue were all equally advantaged and experienced profound fairness. But the exchange seemed utterly uninterested in a more profound unfairness, the fact that any trader not paying rent space in the NYSE facility was distinctly disadvantaged. Now, why does this matter? It matters because of the nature of modern trading. The bustling trading floor of popular imagination is no more. Now, as much as 70% of the trading on the NYSE is now high-frequency trading, in which a computer makes the trading decisions based on minuscule arbitrage opportunities in market prices, and the shares are often held for fractions of a second. For this type of trading, getting your order to the front of the trading queue is not the most important thing, it's the only thing. That's why spread networks invested hundreds of millions of dollars to build fiber optic link along the shortest route between the NYSE and the Chicago Board of Trade. The link cut transmission time to an estimated 13.3 milliseconds. But that is the proverbial slow boat to China compared to the 2 microwave networks now under construction, which promise to cut the time to 8 to 9 milliseconds. So why does all of this infrastructure investment make economic sense? If traders using it can get their orders a millisecond faster than the hoi polloi, they will have a proverbial license to print money. It's all part of playing our emergent global economic game. So too was the accounting approach Lehman Brothers used in the lead up to its catastrophic crash and bankruptcy filing on September 15th, 2008. Even though Lehman was getting into ever deeper financial distress, its quarterly financial statements didn't look particularly bad. Lehman was able to camouflage its decline by using repurchase agreements, specifically the now infamous Repo 105 vehicle. Repo 105 is a legitimate accounting technique that allows a firm to classify a short-term loan as a sale. Yes, this is true, a short-term loan as a sale. Lehman used these repurchase agreements extensively. At the end of the quarter, Lehman would take out a massive short-term loan. It got as high as $50 billion in the second quarter of 2008, classify it as a sale, and use the loan to pay down its debt. So the balance sheet looked just fine unless one scrutinized the footnotes very, very carefully. After the quarterly statements were released, blessed by Lehman's Big Four audit firm and its Magic Circle legal advisor, Lehman would repay the short-term loan and reinflate its long-term debt. The public remained largely unaware of Lehman's precarious financial state and the methods it used to stay afloat in the short term. This was all perfectly legal. Lehman scrupulously followed the letter of the law regarding Repo 105. Lehman and its advisors were all playing the game using all the tools available to them. Finally, consider the quarterly dance between CEOs and stock analysts. While it may seem that the back and forth of earnings guidance and consensus estimates has long been a fixture of our capital market, it actually hasn't been around for terribly long. In the 60s and 70s, analysts didn't matter all that much. Variability between their estimates and the challenge of picking between them diminished the perceived value. But by 1983, when Jeff Parker created First Call to aggregate analysts' forecasts into consensus estimates, analysts were coming of age. The consensus estimate, a single, easily understood and widely disseminated number, had the potential to reduce uncertainty and make investment decisions much easier. No wonder after Parker sold First Call to information giant Thomson Corporation, the consensus estimate became a central feature of capital markets. A decade later, CEOs were freed up to provide guidance to the capital markets on upcoming earnings. The Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995 facilitated the making of forward-looking statements by CEOs. All a CEO had to do is note that the information was being shared under the safe harbor provision of the Act, which warned investors that the CEO was indeed speculating on what might happen in the future. Protected by the safe harbor, CEOs began to spend a lot of their time and energy on providing guidance, and they got really good at it. Before 1995, US publicly traded companies beat their consensus estimates 50% of the time, as one would expect, given the random nature of economic activities. By 1997, they were able to meet or beat consensus estimates an impressive 70% of the time. Such accuracy suggests the CEOs began to use the safe harbor provision and the guidance it allowed to influence or manage expectations down to a level they could certainly beat. So, co-locating trading servers, repo 105s, and earnings management, these are but 3 examples of gaming the modern capital markets game. In each case, the rules of the game are followed. There's no rule that says the NYSE can't rent out space in its facility to hardwire traders directly to its servers. There are rules about Repo 105 transactions, and according to the finest auditors and lawyers on the planet, Lehman was following those rules, and allowing CEOs to make forward-looking statements that cause analysts to adjust their earnings estimates in a way that CEOs prefer, that too is perfectly legitimate and condoned explicitly by the safe harbor provision of US law. So what is the concern here? The fundamental problem is this kind of gaming threatens the underlying game. The underlying game here is business, and it is truly an important game. Business is a game in which companies supply real and valued products or services to customers. Business is the game that generates value for customers, jobs for employees, and returns for investors. Done well, it creates net wealth and prosperity for society. The functioning of this game is central to the well-being and prosperity, or lack thereof, of every country on the planet. The capital markets are a vital component of this game. In order to grow and thrive, companies need capital. Investors are the source of that capital, and much modern investment is made through our public capital markets, and for equity capital, through the stock exchanges in particular. So for this game to work, 2 pillars must work in tandem: businesses and the capital markets that finance them. Threats to either pillar threaten the game. The game is threatened if businesses, aided and abetted by prominent auditors and lawyers, hide mountains of debt from investors using obscure accounting provisions. It is threatened if stock analysts are manipulated by CEOs using the safe harbor provision, and if CEOs spend more time shaping analyst expectations than running their business. It's threatened by unequal access, in which some firms have preferential and tangible speed advantages over others in the zero-sum game of stock trading. These techniques may be profitable and enjoyable for the gamers, the high-frequency traders, the hedge funds, the stock-compensated CEOs, but they cannot exist without the underlying game. Yet these gamers parasitically feed off the game of business. They seem blissfully unaware that if they destroy that game, they'll destroy themselves too. Now this, of course, is not a controversial premise. George Akerlof wrote about the collapse of markets in his 1970 paper, Market for Lemons, which he won a share of the Nobel Prize in economics for later. Akerlof explains that if participants fear there are enough lemons lurking undetected in their market, they can and will abandon the market entirely, and it will collapse. However, when I suggest to current capital market players that gaming places the system at risk, they argue that there's always been gaming. They assert there's always been a race to get information speed advantage over competitive traders, pointing to the Rothschilds family's fabled carrier pigeons. Their pigeons brought back early news of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo and enabled the Rothschilds to make huge profits trading before those with whom they were trading knew the outcome of the battle. True, there always has and always will be gaming. It's part of the cycle of innovation. But there's a huge difference between a situation in which a clever trader generates and takes advantage of proprietary information related to a single event and the systematic use of an advantage by a special group of traders for every single transaction on every single day. The same folks argue that there have always been incidents of aggressive accounting that may cross the line into fraudulent accounting, but contemplate the recent escalation in scale and scope. Waste Management's cumulative misstatement between 1992 and 1997 broke the billion-dollar fraud barrier for the first time ever, and coming in at a whopping $1.7 billion. And following that, in quick succession, were the multi-billion-dollar accounting frauds at Enron, Adelphia, Global Crossing, Quest, Tyco, WorldCom, Royal Ahol, and Parmalat. Despite the passage of Sarbanes-Oxley, multi-billion-dollar fraud proceeds apace, including the aforementioned Lehman Brothers. Finally, some folks argue to me that CEOs have always manipulated earnings to improve their personal compensation. Indeed, I'm sure they have. But prior to 1980, there was close to zero stock-based compensation for CEOs, and the incentive to manipulate earnings was tiny compared to the incentive in the post-1980 period. When stock-based compensation burgeoned, suddenly earnings manipulation had potentially huge payoffs. How widespread is earnings manipulation? For a 2005 article, finance professors John Graham, Campbell Harvey, and Shiva Ragapal surveyed 400 financial executives from large US public companies and found that a majority of them, 75% of them in fact, agreed that in order to meet the current quarter's analyst consensus earnings, they would defer or cancel entirely attractive projects. The effects of earnings manipulation are real and they are growing. So all games need rules, including economic games like trading, accounting, and compensation. The prevailing view of our economic game seems to be, so long as we have rules and we enforce them, the game will be just fine. But gaming is not a stable phenomenon. It's a dynamic, self-reinforcing system. Clever innovators figure out an initial way to game the game, then everybody watching replicates the gambit, eliminating the initial advantage. So the cleverest gamers realize that they have to take their gaming to the next level. This is eventually matched, which produces the next level of gaming, and so on. That's how we get 70% share for high-frequency trade and billions of dollars spent on ultra-high-speed networks. It is how we not get the occasional repurchase agreement, but $50 billion of repo 105s for a single company. And it's how leading companies can manage earnings and analysts to get the utterly unnatural results. And the more important the game, the more dedicated the gamers. And the capital markets have become by far the biggest economic game in the world. For that reason, the most motivated gamers are focused on it. And they're succeeding. The biggest gamers in the world are hedge fund managers, and they've quickly become the most potent economic force in America. The annual Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans is a chronicler of wealth in America. Historically, the most common way to get on that list was to build an oil and gas, a retailing, a media, or a real estate empire. Then in the 90s, the new way was to have built a technology empire, like Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, Paul Allen. In 2000, those three held spots 1 through 3 on the Forbes list. And they were accompanied by 87 members of the list who's built their fortune on technology company. And media was next with 59. But the 2000 list also heralded the arrival of a new kind of billionaire. These were hedge fund managers who made their fortunes in the trading game. Four hedge fund managers made the list that year. But since 2000, the rise of hedge funds has been nothing short of spectacular. On the 2012 list, 35 hedge fund managers. And technology, the number one, is down to 43 after the dot-com bubble burst. The growth in hedge fund managers on the list is the highest growth by far of any source of wealth. Now, conventional wisdom says this is just fine, that is a small and natural evolution of the market. Yet shortly, the best way to become wealthy in America will be to trade other people's money. This is a zero-sum game in which a dollar made by a hedge fund manager is a dollar lost by someone else. Hedge funds exist to trade value rather than build it. A technology company creates value when it offers a new product that has sufficient value for customers to pay more than it costs to produce. That's a positive-sum game in which both customers and the company are better off. A shift to trading rather than building as the best way to gain wealth is a profound change in the structure of the game. And the bigger and more powerful these players become, the greater risk they pose to our shared game. Even now, they seem prone to push the rules to breaking point. The Rajaratnam scandal exposed the unseemly world of expert networks in the hedge fund industry. He peaked at number 236 on the Forbes 400 list thanks to performance of his hedge fund Galleon Group. But it was found to have used insider information from, among others, the former managing director of McKinsey & Company, Rajat Gupta, who used information from public company board meetings to supply inside information to Rajaratnam. Both Menz and other associates have been convicted of insider trading. Stephen Cohen listed at number 40 on the Forbes list, and members of his current and former SAC Capital team have been investigated for pushing past the boundaries of acceptable into the illegal. Let me be clear, while Cohen himself has neither been charged nor convicted of an offense, numerous current or former employees have been either convicted of or pleaded guilty to insider trading charges. I would argue that rules alone don't protect a game, even if they're rigorously enforced. A fixed set of rules won't stop the gamers from gaming because the world changes and games evolve. A rigid adherence to a single unchanging set of rules by some players simply offers more power to those inclined to game the game. It is almost enough to make one give up on rules entirely, but in a free market, or a market free-for-all is clearly not the answer. The only solution is to accept that the game you love will always be gamed by the most dedicated, talented, and ruthless gamers. So don't attempt to set, maintain, and enforce the perfect set of rules. Rather, adjust them continuously to counteract the gaming. The key is not the rules themselves, but the principles that guide the continuous adjustment of the rules. The National Football League in America provides an excellent example on this front. It has always had rules, and at any given point in time, a very specific set of them, and it enforces them rigorously, but understands that they will be gamed by particularly clever coaches. So annually, it tweaks the rules of the game to make sure that the gaming doesn't endanger the underlying game. Regular tweaking of the rules is critical to success, but the question is how to tweak. The tweaking needs to be guided at all times by an unwavering set of principles. As the rules evolve, the principles must remain steadfast. In the case of the NFL, the guiding principle is what is best for the fans, not what is best for the owners or even for the players. The owners might think, we own the teams, our interests should come first. But it doesn't matter how much owners' interests are theoretically privileged, owners won't benefit if fans aren't delighted. And when the NFL's competition committee meets at the end of every season to consider tweaking the rules, the fan experience comes first. Whether they tweak the rules to keep the offense and defense in balance, or to protect star players from industry, or to maintain competitive balance, the core principle is that if the fans' interests are upheld, everything else largely takes care of itself. In this system, those who innovate within the current set of rules are able to benefit for a time, but not forever, from the fruits of their innovation. If an innovator, for example, figures out how to enable the offense to gain an advantage over the defense, as did legendary offensive genius Bill Walsh, or the reverse, as did legendary defensive genius Bill Parcells, the competition committee will figure out how to rein in that advantage, even though it was created in a perfectly legal fashion. The committee doesn't delay in taking action because it's reluctant to undermine a perfectly legal innovation. It doesn't believe that the current rules are somehow sacrosanct. It tweaks quickly in small ways as necessary to protect the fan experience. That is the guiding principle. The focus on principles over rules doesn't happen only in sports. It can happen in the capital markets. When it comes to banking, Canada shares many similarities with the US. It has large universal commercial banks that offer a broad range of services, much like those of US banks, and under a regulatory structure that looks on its face quite a bit like the one in the US. The banks are publicly traded and widely held, just like the US banks. But in the wake of the 2008 financial sector meltdown, not a single Canadian bank required government bailout, not even close. While vast swaths of the US banking system required massive government intervention and taxpayer resources, as well as banks in the UK and Europe. Given the structural similarities, why the massive difference in outcomes? Undoubtedly, there are many reasons, but one reason is that the Canadian banks were supervised more so by a set of principles versus the US banks more so by a set of rules. As the banks in the US did ever more risky things all within the existing rules, they were left to their own devices. Executives at the major banks gamed the system for their own advantage and kept doing so more and more until they blew themselves up and severely damaged the economy. In Canada, there were rules, but more important, there were principles. A central figure in applying the principles was Julie Dixon, the superintendent of the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, called OSFI. Instead of operating strictly by the proverbial book, Dixon met regularly with the leadership of the Canadian banks, and when she saw something that they were doing that was just plain silly, she told them to stop it, whether or not it was within the rules. Canadian banks didn't avoid the fate of the US banks because of rules, they avoided it because of principles. So rules can't stop the gamers from gaming. We should stop thinking that they can. Principles that guide us to tweak the rules appropriately are the only thing that can protect the precious games in our economy. But what principles? Being guided by crummy principles is hardly an advantage over being controlled by inflexible rules. The American obsession with the principle of shareholder value maximization is a perfect illustration. It's a crummy principle that has aided the gamers in undermining American capitalism. So what are the principles that should guide us in protecting and enhancing modern democratic capitalism? I do not propose to have the full answer. This is a project to which I and others will be turning in earnest in the next few years. But to get the thinking started, I'd offer 4 principles helpfully supported by the greatest management thinker of the past century, Peter Drucker. First, I believe that if we hold the principle that the customer comes first, we will be more likely to nurture healthier economic games that produce greater societal value. Putting the fans first has helped the owners and players succeed in the NFL. If the fans are happy, the owners will do well. It does not work so well the other way around. Yet in the capital markets, we've increasingly put investors first. The capital markets are merely an aggregation of individual companies who trade on stock exchanges. And at the individual company level, it may seem at first blush that putting shareholder value first would be best for shareholders. It is not. Putting customers first is the best way for shareholders of individual companies to prosper. In the long run, investors are best off when companies grow and succeed, and that's what maximizes stock values. If we focus on making the stock markets work wonderfully for investors, rather than on helping companies raise equity, manage their operations, serve their customers for the long haul, investors will actually suffer. Artifacts like mandatory quarterly reporting and incredibly complicated and legalistic requirements for issuing treasury stock may seem sensible, if not optimal, if investors come first, but if instead issuers come first as the true customers of stock markets, I believe we would be better off. Putting customers first, of course, is not new. Peter Drucker said 60 years ago that the purpose of a company is to create a customer. Then it may have been a novel and controversial idea, but it shouldn't be anymore. Second, I believe that if we seek integrative solutions on principle, we will be more likely to prosper. Currently, integrative thinking is not the core principle of the modern world or capitalism or capital markets. Our world operates instead on the principle that deep and narrow specialization is the most important capability to pursue and value. As long as that is the case, we'll produce narrow answers that don't take advantage of the understanding of the whole. Since the world is complex and interrelated, we build simplified models of it in order to function. Nowhere do we do that more than the capital markets. Yet when we operate it on the basis of these narrow models, avoiding complexity, we get into trouble. The less integrative our thinking, the more capital markets crashes we will produce, as in 2008, on the basis of financial models that look at only pieces of the true financial picture. The more integrative our thinking, the more our models will be consistent with the way the world actually works, and the better chance they will produce results that we actually need and want. Again, this is not new. Peter Drucker has long said this to be the case, and said so in addressing an audience at the Rotman School in 2002. He said, "There are no tax problems, there are only business problems. There are no marketing decisions, there are only business decisions. There are no specialty results, there are only business results." Third, we should hold as a principle that we seek sustainability. If instead, as was the case leading up to the financial crisis, the principle is that we should do whatever is doable until the music stops, we will get utterly unsustainable games, like the subprime mortgage bubble, that crash spectacularly. Similarly, if companies believe that they needn't be concerned with environmental sustainability and aren't required by the capital markets to pay attention to it, company performance will only prosper until such time as the ecology collapses, taking business with it. Once again, Peter Drucker was decades ahead of his time on the sustainability front, arguing famously in 1954 that what is most important is that management realize it must consider the impact of business policy and business action upon society. It has to consider whether the action is likely to promote the public good and to advance the beliefs of our society to contribute to its stability, strength, and harmony. Fourth and finally, we should hold the principle that we support positive-sum games and discourage zero-sum games. Unfortunately, lots of the opposite goes on, as is the case with private equity taxation. The largest form of private equity, hedge fund management, is entirely a zero-sum game. Hedge fund managers trade financial instruments, and when they make a dollar, somebody else automatically loses a dollar. They add zero net value to society. Yet the carried interest that they earn as a fee for trading on behalf of their limited partner investors is taxed at the highly preferential capital gains rate. This represents the use of the tax system to encourage rather than discourage a large and rapidly growing zero-sum game. Meanwhile, income earned by executives who build companies is taxed at a much higher ordinary income tax rate, which discourages the positive sum game of growing a real company. Modern capitalism is increasingly being dominated by the trading of value rather than the building of value. Much, if not all, of the trading creates no value for society. We need to ensure that zero-sum trading is not favored by our rules, but rather discouraged. When rules are altered, one core principle behind the alteration needs to be the encouragement of positive-sum games. While Peter Drucker didn't use the terminology of positive or zero-sum games directly, he spoke consistently about the creation of value. He encouraged all managers to ask themselves perpetually, what should my contribution be? To him, an effective manager was one who focuses his or her work and energy on tasks that create a positive contribution. In the end, the principle of principles holds that, like all games, democratic capitalism will be gamed, and because of that, we need to be prepared to continuously tweak the rules of the game to protect it. The rule tweaking must be guided by a set of principles, because otherwise the tweaking won't be likely to maintain a productive and healthy game. The 4 principles that should guide our tweaking are that the customer should come first, that we seek integrative solutions, we should seek sustainability, and we should encourage positive sum games. With these principles in mind, democratic capitalism, which I believe is the surest and best route to prosperity, can survive and thrive. Thank you very much.
Regarding these two very different talks here, I would like to open a session for questions now. Perhaps we can collect some questions. You can mention if you are asking a question to one or the other speaker or to both. Please mention your name, your company, and yes, go ahead. Do we have microphones? Anyone raising hands? The ladies will find you.
Thank you. I'm Donald Schott from academia, not from business. I'm a professor of management in Hungary, and I have 2 questions to Professor Shechtman. Sir, you mentioned the most important factors, environmental factors, to support entrepreneurship. And the number 1 on the list was good quality basic education. I wonder, what do you think about the chances of those countries which have to minimize money invested in education because of the austerity measures imposed by the financial markets? And the second question, based on my research, I found another environmental factor which is important for entrepreneurship, and this is the social capital, the strength of social capital in a society, or using a simple word, trust in the society. I would like to ask your opinion about these environmental factors. Have you found this to be important in Israel as well? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can we perhaps have another question so we collect some?
I need to sit by her. Do you mind? Yes. Yeah. I must confess that there is a bad combination. Stay by me, please. There's a bad combination of acoustics and my bad hearing, so I will need you to repeat the questions to me briefly. Right. No, speak to me. They heard it.
The question is, the factor for entrepreneurship, meaning education, the problem with the countries who do not have the money for proper education. How you see it, especially in Europe where we have austerity programs, money has been cut, so money is a problem regarding education. We said education is very important. And social capital, does it play a role? Social capital, yes, from charities.
Okay, so if a country doesn't have money, what can it do for education? This is question number one. Well, if a country doesn't have money for education, every country has teachers. Every country in the world has teachers. The thing is that education should be spread all over the country, and even teachers that get low salaries can teach. Because this is so important, education is job one. This is the most important thing a country can invest for its future. And it is a long process. It is clearly a long process. But children has to know how to read and write. And how to do some mathematics, and to understand the world around them. It's a must. And I don't know any country that does not have teachers. All countries have teachers. So I don't think it's a question of money. I think the main question is, what do you teach and how do you teach it? And is everybody exposed to education? And by that I mean the following. Many countries have a law in which the country is obliged to provide education to all. The same law should be applied the other way, that every parent has to allow his child to go to school. And this is not clear, of course, here in Europe. There is no question about it. But in different countries, this is not the case. In different countries, although there is free education for all, parents prefer their children to herd the cows and do not allow them to go to school. So the law should be both. The government should provide, and the law says if you are a parent who does not send your child to school, you will be punished for that. You have to send your child to school. So this is the beginning. The second question was, what is the role of charity money and so on? No? Okay, please explain.
Social capitalism.
The importance of trust, social capital in society. That is important, in your opinion, for entrepreneurship or not? When we trust each other in business, in society.
Trust in society. The question of trust in society. If trust in society also is means capital, means an asset.
I must say that I do not understand the question. Trust means, does the society trust the government or trust money?
Each other. If there is trust between government and society.
Trust between government and the people.
Yes, and within business, basically the strength of social capital.
Do you understand the question?
Well, you mean social capital as the trust, per se?
Trust is basically a part of social capital.
So you're talking about states which offer a certain trust to their citizens?
No, I'm talking about the nature of the society, whether it is natural to trust each other in business, then people trust the institutions, etc.
Okay, I now understand the question.
How do people stick together in a society?
I think I understand. How is trust among people and government affect entrepreneurship? Yes, it affects entrepreneurship. I talk about countries in which there is a reasonable trust in the government, and the government has a reasonable reason to trust the people, and the people can trust each other, so that they, when they sign a contract, that contract will be considered when there are conflicts. Okay, this is the question. Okay, certainly, countries which do not have all that cannot develop, and it has to do with corruption that I have mentioned. It doesn't work. If the system is corrupt, and if there is no trust among people, among themselves, and there is no trust between the government and the people in the government, bad news. But education, in the long run, can solve that. So education for values, not only for facts, is extremely important. It's a very long process. It may take a generation or two, but you have to start somewhere.
Thank you. Is there any question perhaps to Roger?
I have one question. My name is Jørgen Andersen from Nordic Innovation. Thanks for two very, very nice and good presentations. My question to Dan Shechtman is the story about Israel and the startup nation. We all know this, and it's a fantastic story, and entrepreneurship. What is less pronounced, perhaps, is the influx of very skilled people from its former Soviet Union. I think it was around 1 million people that came to Israel in the 90s and 20s. So my brief question is, how big an impact had these people, or this special feature of the Israel history? And if it is a one-off thing, how will you keep that startup nation sustainable? So that's one question. For Roger Martin, I said thank you very much too for very interesting presentation. And my question is that it seems that West or European and especially American capitalism has developed into a kind of oligarch elite that has amassed control over the financial system. And as we know from history, oligarch elites are not often willing to give up their power or the privileges. So how do we as societies take back the part of the capitalist or the financial part of the system in a situation if we assume that it's kind of hedge fund, oligarch elite, whatever we call it? Thank you.
Okay, so there were three questions here, really. Number one, what is the effect of the Russian immigration on the development of Israel entrepreneurship? Number two, how can we sustain that? And number three, how we can more evenly distribute the means. Is that correct? Okay. The Russian immigration to Israel was a fantastic event in the history of the development of the country. There were about 1 million people that immigrated from the Soviet Union, ex-Soviet Union, to now Russia and other states, to Israel. 1 million of educated, industrious people who contributed dramatically to the well-being of the country, not only in the technological terms, but in music, and in literature, and in journalism, and so on. It was fantastic. I think that Russia lost so much in the process. This is number one. This was an extremely good way. How do you sustain that? How do you continue the process? You continue, this is my humble opinion, you continue the process by continuing to do everything right. That means encourage entrepreneurship, encourage technological entrepreneurship. And let me dwell on that a little bit, because my talk was extremely short and I could not say everything. But so what does it mean? It means openness to the world. Everybody should know how to speak and understand English. I speak in countries in which I have to have interpreters. I speak English, they speak Ukrainian. Or I speak English, they speak Russian, or so on. People like you who were born in some countries cannot speak English. This is very bad. Not because I think that English is such a great language, which it is, but because this is a communicating language in the world. This is the lingua franca of today. So we all must speak English so that we can communicate. Israelis are very well exposed to the world. They travel in the world. They are repeating tourists and very curious people. So they travel through the world, and they are very industrious. Okay, so how can you sustain it? The government should not make mistakes on this. You want some government support, but you do not want too much government involvement. There is a balance. You have to maintain that balance. And education. education. I have just started a project to teach physics in kindergartens. I'm talking about logical thinking, rational thinking to 4 and 5 years old children, and real physics. They should understand the world around them. And you know what? They can understand physics. No equations, but they can really understand physics. We should start very early. And in Israel, we try to do it, to try to make it. What was the third question?
Perhaps we can pass on the third question to Roger Martin. It's regarding the oligarchs, which we have more and more, which you mentioned. So we leave it to you.
Sure. I think it's an interesting question, and I actually think that America is kind of unique in the degree to which it doesn't have oligarchs of the same sort. I mean, the power is actually quite distributed. There are many, 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 many hedge fund managers. There are many, many big banks, not only a few. And so I think the issue really is, how do we keep tweaking the rules to keep ahead of the cleverest and most ruthless of the folks who are gaming the game? And it's maybe a trickier question in the U.S. because you can't just say, here are the 3 people, you've got to stop doing what they're doing. You've got to change, you've got to tweak the system. Again, why I use the word tweaking is because I think the thing, you don't want to make huge changes. You don't want to wait 5 years and then say, oh, it's all terrible, now we've got to make huge changes. You want to every year make little tweaks to tweak the system to stay one step ahead of the gamers. Thanks.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Here, perhaps we have the microphone. Front.
Question for Professor Martin. This is Peter Solmson from Siemens. Anybody who's ever run a Salesforce is familiar with the dynamic that you were describing. And which leads me to the next level of inquiry. If you can agree that there need to be principles which lead to intelligent tweaking, what do you do if the system is incapable of adopting that? I'm thinking work that Larry Lessig is doing at Harvard, when the political system is incapable of adopting neutral principles and presumably implementing intelligent tweaks.
Well, I think that is the fundamental, foundational question of how good a modern democratic capitalist economy will be, actually. I mean, that's why I think having political education, having broad political participation, and having a view and an understanding of how important that is so important to a country. And yes, the United States has got some kind of real challenges with I think a very kind of legalistic view of the world, where the notion is, if it's okay by the rules, then let's do it. So most, if not all, of what not all, most of what the big banks, the too big to fail banks, were doing was totally legal and destructive, absolutely destructive, and we're all paying for it. And I think in the U.S. system, there's more of a likelihood of the bankers, if somebody says stop doing that, to say sue me, instead of contemplating whether, gee, maybe stopping doing it is actually a good idea. So I think sort of reinvigorating the personal participation in democracy, and recognizing that some of the very foundations of democracy are absolutely important and have these critical ripple effects down the road is one of the challenges, I think, of modern democratic capitalism of 2.0.
Thank you. Well, I think you are all seeing this water here, and as Dan said, it's very unfair. We have some coffee and other drinks outside. I would say we finished the session.